Ladies and gentlemen, there are battles that do not begin in the open fields of life, but in the quiet corners of our homes, even in the silence of a bathroom where no one is watching. You may not know it, but atmospheres are real, and spirits are sensitive to spaces. What you keep around, you can either invite light or entertain darkness. There are 4 things you must stop keeping there if you desire spiritual clarity. First, anything broken. A cracked mirror, a leaking container, a damaged object silently speaks disorder. In the realm of the spirit, broken things symbolize fragmented identity and neglected foundations. Second, expired products. What has lost its usefulness carries the energy of decay. Spiritually, it represents holding on to seasons God has already closed. Third, objects tied to immoral memories. Items connected to sin or past bondage can reopen doors you prayed God to shut. Fourth, filth and hidden dirt. Uncleanliness does not just repel people, it affects spiritual sensitivity. Clean spaces honor a holy God. Guard your atmosphere, because what surrounds you can shape what surrounds your destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, there are mysteries in the realm of the spirit that many people overlook because they appear ordinary to the natural eye. A broken and damaged item in your bathroom may look insignificant, just a cracked mirror hanging quietly on the wall, a shattered soap dish at the corner of the sink, a leaking bucket that you have promised yourself to replace but never did. Yet, in the language of the spirit, brokenness speaks. It communicates disorder, neglect, and fragmentation. It may be physical in appearance, but spiritually, it can mirror the condition of a man's inner world. When you stand before a cracked mirror every morning, you may think you are only seeing your reflection, but symbolically, you are confronting a distorted image. The mirror was designed to present you whole, clear, and undivided. Once it is cracked, your image is divided into pieces. And many believers do not realize that environments constantly preach to the subconscious. A fractured mirror subtly reinforces a fractured identity. You begin to normalize distortion. You become comfortable with pieces instead of wholeness. But the God we serve is a God of order, beauty, and perfection. He does not operate in chaos, and he does not reveal himself in confusion. A leaking tap that drips day and night may seem like a small mechanical fault, yet spiritually, it can symbolize loss and wastage. Drop by drop, water escapes unnoticed. In the same way, when disorder is tolerated, virtue, discipline, and spiritual fervor can leak away gradually. You will not always hear loud alarm when things are going wrong. Sometimes it is a silent drip, a slow compromise, a gentle acceptance of what should have been corrected. Broken objects silently endorse carelessness, and carelessness can become a gateway to deeper spiritual decline. A damaged container that can no longer hold what it was designed to carry speaks of compromised capacity. God created you as a vessel of honor, designed to carry his glory. But when vessels are cracked, what they carry can leak. When you allow broken items to remain in your space, you are unconsciously tolerating a narrative of insufficiency. You are rehearsing the story that it is acceptable to function below divine standard. Yet Scripture reveals a God who restores, who mends, who makes all things new. Why then should brokenness become decoration in a space you inhabit daily? Disorder also affects spiritual sensitivity. The bathroom is a place of cleansing, a place where you wash away physical impurities. Symbolically, it represents renewal and preparation. If the space meant for cleansing is filled with broken objects, the symbolism is disrupted. Instead of reflecting restoration, it reflects neglect. Instead of echoing purity, it whispers carelessness. The spiritual realm responds to patterns. When order is established physically, it often aligns with order spiritually. There is a reason God gave detailed instructions about the arrangement of sacred spaces. Structure invites glory. Broken things also carry emotional residue. Sometimes you keep a damaged item because of attachment, because you tell yourself it still works somehow. In the same way, many people cling to broken mindsets, broken relationships, broken habits, convincing themselves that functionality is enough, even when wholeness is absent. The presence of visibly damaged objects reinforces the tolerance of internal damage. You stop aspiring for restoration because you have grown familiar with fragments. Every space you occupy creates an atmosphere. Atmosphere influences thought patterns. Thought patterns shape decisions. Decisions determine destiny. It begins subtly, with something as small as a cracked tile or a shattered frame, but consistency forms culture. If you cultivate a culture that permits brokenness to remain unaddressed, you may unknowingly cultivate a life that tolerates unresolved issues. God is intentional. When He rebuilds a life, He does not patch it carelessly. He restores it with precision and glory. You must understand that spiritual authority thrives in environments of order. When you step into a space that is clean, whole, and well-arranged, your mind experiences clarity. Clarity strengthens focus. Focus enhances prayer. Prayer deepens intimacy with God. But when your eyes constantly register damage and disorder, it creates subtle distraction. It normalizes imperfection in areas where excellence should reign. You were not called to reflect fragmentation. You were called to reflect the image of a perfect and holy God. Remove what is broken, not only as an act of cleaning, but as a prophetic declaration that your life will not mirror damage, that your identity will not be divided, that your space will testify of restoration and divine order. Ladies and gentlemen, there are seasons in a man's life, and every season has an expiry date attached to it. Just as products in your bathroom carry labels that declare when they are no longer safe for use, so also moments, relationships, habits, and dimensions of grace have timelines determined by God. When a product expires, it does not always change its appearance immediately. It may still look attractive, still smell pleasant, still sit confidently on the shelf. But internally, its effectiveness has diminished. Its potency has weakened. What once healed can now harm. What once refreshed can now irritate. And this is how many believers hold on to expired seasons. An expired bottle of lotion sitting quietly in the corner may seem harmless. You tell yourself it can still be managed, that it is not completely finished. But expiration is a statement of closure. It is a divine announcement that this phase has served its purpose. When you ignore expiration dates in the natural, you risk irritation and infection. When you ignore expiration dates in the spirit, you risk stagnation and spiritual decline. God is progressive. He moves from glory to glory. He does not dwell in yesterday's oil. Expired products represent attachments to former victories. There was a time when that strategy worked. There was a time when that connection was beneficial. There was a time when that mindset produced results. But seasons change. The manna that fed Israel yesterday could not be stored for tomorrow. It would spoil. God designed it that way to teach dependence and movement. When you insist on preserving what heaven has concluded, you resist divine transition. You create clutter in your space and confusion in your spirit. Sometimes the hardest thing is not starting something new, but letting go of something old. You look at that half-used product and think of the money spent, the memories attached, the convenience it once provided. In the same way, people cling to expired seasons because of emotional investment. You say, I have poured too much into this to let it go. But obedience to God often requires release. Expiration is not punishment, it is protection. It prevents you from applying something that no longer carries grace. A bathroom filled with expired items is a testimony of reluctance. It silently declares an inability to confront closure. And spiritually, many environments reflect the same hesitation. You cannot receive fresh oil if your shelf is crowded with old containers. You cannot experience new growth if you are constantly revisiting former chapters. God's agenda is forward. When He closes a door, it is not to frustrate you, but to redirect you. But if you keep the expired item visible, you continually rehearse the past. There is also a danger in using what has expired. In the natural, expired substances can cause irritation to the skin. Spiritually, expired strategies can irritate your destiny. You may find yourself striving harder with diminishing results. You may pray the same way you prayed years ago without sensitivity to the present move of God. You may hold on to relationships that once strengthened you, but now limit you. Expired things no longer align with current grace. They belong to a former dimension. God is intentional about timing. Ecclesiastes declares that there is a time for everything under heaven. When the time passes, wisdom demands recognition. To ignore expiration is to resist wisdom. When you clear out expired products from your bathroom, you are making space. Space is powerful. It allows circulation. It allows clarity. It allows readiness for what is next. Spiritually, clearing expired seasons creates expectation. It signals to heaven that you are prepared for fresh instruction. Expired items also create hidden contamination. They may not appear dangerous, but their internal composition has shifted. In the same way, outdated beliefs can subtly contaminate your perception. Old wounds can color new opportunities. Former disappointments can distort fresh blessings. If you do not examine and remove what has expired, you may unknowingly apply it again. You may repeat patterns that God already ended. The discipline of discarding expired things is an act of discernment. It requires honesty. It requires courage. It requires trust that what God is bringing is better than what He has taken. When you remove an expired product, you acknowledge that its assignment is complete. You do not insult it, you simply release it. In the same way, honoring past seasons does not mean preserving them beyond their time. Gratitude should not become captivity. As you examine your space, let it become a prophetic exercise. Look at what has expired and ask yourself what in your life carries a similar label. Is there a mindset that once protected you but now restricts you? Is there a comfort zone that once nurtured you but now confines you? Is there a habit that once served a purpose but now drains virtue? The courage to discard expired things physically can awaken the grace to release expired seasons, spiritually making room for fresh oil, fresh fire, and fresh alignment with the present voice of God. Ladies and gentlemen, there are things we hold on to in our lives, things that seem harmless on the surface but carry hidden weight and subtle power over our hearts and minds. Objects tied to immoral memories fall into this category. They are silent witnesses of choices we made, mistakes we lived through, and doors we once opened that God had already called us to close. In a bathroom, these items might be as simple as a gift received in a season of weakness, a magazine tucked away for nostalgia, or a product associated with habits that were never in alignment with holiness. On the surface, they may appear neutral, yet they carry a resonance that can influence your spiritual sensitivity. Memory is a powerful force. It does not merely recall the past, it recreates the atmosphere of the past. When you keep objects tied to sin, even in a hidden corner, your mind unconsciously revisits those moments. What seemed trivial becomes a bridge to past choices, a reminder of the doors you prayed God to shut. Spiritually, God calls us to forget what lies behind and press toward what is ahead, to forget the former things and embrace His newness. But objects act like triggers, and every trigger reopens the same pathways you believed were closed. These items also carry emotional residue. You may keep them out of sentimentality, telling yourself, it's harmless, it reminds me of growth. But growth does not require keeping relics of sin. Growth requires leaving behind what once harmed you. By tolerating objects connected to immoral experiences, you rehearse familiarity with error. You normalize remembrance instead of restoration. You certainly communicate to your spirit that some doors remain ajar when they should be sealed. The bathroom is a place of cleansing. It is meant for renewal, for washing away what is unclean, for preparation the self to face the world. When objects tied to past immorality occupy this sacred, intimate space, they disrupt the symbolic act of purification. Every shower, every cleansing ritual is a moment when you should reconnect with God in purity. Yet when reminders of sin linger, they cloud the atmosphere. The spirit is sensitive. It registers these energies. It knows the difference between spaces of holiness and spaces of lingering compromise. Holding on to such items is not merely about attachment. It reflects a tolerance for past pain and unresolved guilt. Many believers carry invisible burdens because they refuse to remove physical triggers of the past. You think the item is inert, but the memory it invokes is active. It whispers, it nudges, it tempts. You may pray, you may fast, yet these relics subtly undermine your spiritual alignment. They are like a shadow in the room that never fully disappears unless you deliberately remove the source. Another danger is the repetition of patterns. Objects tied to sin can inadvertently normalize behaviors you had once repented of. They can condition the mind to revisit old strategies, old thoughts, old cravings. Spiritual victory is maintained through vigilance and proactive removal of all elements that can pull you backward. Every object has a story, and some stories are incompatible with the new life God calls you to live. To tolerate them is to tolerate regression in areas where progress is essential. Awareness is key. You must become attentive to the subtle messages your environment communicates. The spiritual realm is deeply intertwined with the physical. You cannot separate what you keep around you from the spiritual atmosphere it produces. Just as a rotten fruit left on a counter affects the air in a room, objects tied to immoral memories affect the atmosphere of your spirit. They may not manifest immediately in visible consequence, but their influence is persistent. Over time, subtle distractions accumulate into spiritual dullness, and what once was vibrant becomes muted. Removal of these objects is a deliberate act of authority. It is not superstition, it is spiritual discipline. When you discard what no longer belongs, you are declaring that your space, and by extension your life, is aligned with God's order. You create an environment where holiness can flourish. You make room for new experiences, new revelations, and fresh encounters with God that are untainted by remnants of past compromise. The act of cleansing your space physically becomes a mirror of cleansing your life spiritually, reaffirming that what is behind, and what lies ahead is where your focus will remain. Reflection is essential. Examine every object with honest eyes. Ask yourself why it is there. Ask what memories it carries. Ask whether it aligns with the life God is calling you to live. The courage to remove items tied to immoral memories demonstrates spiritual maturity. It shows a willingness to confront the past, to honor lessons learned, and to refuse to let history dictate your present. Your space becomes a declaration, a visible testimony that you are no longer a prisoner of what once tempted, enticed, or corrupted you. Ladies and gentlemen, there is power in cleanliness that many underestimate. The bathroom is not just a physical space. It is a sanctuary of cleansing, a place where purification takes place daily. When hidden dirt, grime, or filth accumulates, it is not just the body that suffers. The spirit is affected as well. Uncleanliness carries weight beyond appearance. It disrupts flow, it clouds perception, and it can subtly dull spiritual sensitivity. Every speck of hidden dust, every unnoticed stain, every corner left ignored communicates neglect, and in the spiritual realm, neglect is never neutral. When you walk into a bathroom that is orderly, everything in its place, surfaces shining, air fresh, the mind immediately feels relief, clarity, and calm. But when hidden dirt gathers, when corners are ignored, when drains are clogged, the environment begins to weigh heavily without a visible reason. Spiritually, this mirrors how neglected areas of our lives affect our ability to perceive God's presence. A cluttered and dirty space normalizes carelessness. It whispers, you can function in disorder, you can accept compromise. The spirit, sensitive as it is, registers these vibrations, and slowly, your discernment is dulled. Sometimes it is visible, sometimes it is hidden beneath layers, invisible to casual observation. Hidden dirt represents unresolved issues, unnoticed compromises, or spiritual residues that have been ignored for too long. You may think, it's just under the sink, it doesn't matter. But the spiritual principle is the same. What is hidden often influences what is visible. A small neglected corner of dirt can spread over time, contaminating larger spaces. In life, unresolved small sins or ignored wrong mindsets may seem insignificant at first, but they eventually affect your overall spiritual environment, diminishing your sensitivity and readiness to receive revelation. There is also a connection between physical and spiritual hygiene. God created man as a holistic being. Body, mind, and spirit are intertwined. When your surroundings are unclean, it subconsciously signals tolerance for disorder in other areas of your life. It communicates a lack of discipline and diminishes the value of intentionality. Maintaining cleanliness is not merely a routine. It is a spiritual discipline that demonstrates respect for God's order. It is a declaration that you value holiness, not just in ritual or prayer, but in the very spaces you inhabit. Another dimension is the atmosphere of your space. Every room carries energy, and bathrooms are no exception. Hidden filth or dirt creates stagnation. Stagnant spaces resist flow, and in spiritual terms, resistance blocks the circulation of blessing, clarity, and insight. The spiritual realm responds to patterns of environment, and when you allow hidden dirt to remain, you are unintentionally cultivating an atmosphere where stagnation can take root. Spiritually sensitive people notice the difference immediately. Their prayers, meditations, or times of reflection may feel heavy or distracted when the space is not clean, even if the mess is subtle. Filth also invites external forces to linger. Just as bacteria and germs thrive in unclean spaces, negativity, distraction, and unhealthy influences find a foothold in environments that are neglected. A clean environment reflects order, attentiveness, and readiness. It signals that this space is under authority, that it is prepared for intentional use, and that it does not welcome intrusion. Hidden dirt undermines that declaration. It silently communicates tolerance for neglect, and even the smallest level of tolerance can shift spiritual sensitivity over time. Maintaining cleanliness is also a matter of personal discipline. Spiritual progress is built on habits that honor God in every detail. A bathroom cleaned regularly, corners dusted, drains cleared, surfaces scrubbed, and items organized demonstrates intentional stewardship. Every act of cleaning becomes a symbolic act of spiritual alignment. It is a practical way of saying, I will not allow chaos to dominate my environment or my life. I am intentional about what I receive, what I keep, and what I allow to influence my atmosphere. Hidden dirt carries more than physical residue. It carries symbolism. It represents things left unresolved, corners of life ignored, and areas where accountability is lacking. When you take the time to cleanse every hidden crevice, you are not only cleaning the surface, you are declaring authority over every overlooked detail in your life. You are affirming that nothing hidden will have the power to subtly shift your destiny or hinder your spiritual connection. The discipline of removing filth becomes an exercise in vigilance, showing that attention to detail matters, that the small things shape the greater outcomes, and that spiritual sensitivity is cultivated through intentional order. Cleanliness invites clarity. When you remove dirt, the space breathes. When your space breathes, your spirit breathes. Hidden grime clouds the environment, and the spirit reacts to subtle vibrations in the air. Spiritual engagement thrives in clean spaces because order supports focus, attention, and receptivity. By removing hidden dirt, you are creating a sanctuary where your spirit can thrive, where clarity can emerge, and where God's presence can be recognized and embraced without obstruction.